Alright, so gonna get this engine out of this 1990 318 so we can put it in the 91. So the 91 is good to go. So what we're gonna do first is basically we have to do 4 or 5 things to get the engine out. First, we have to disconnect the fuel supply. Now what I'm going to do in this particular case, because I'm not going to put an engine back in this machine, I'm just going to cut the lines. I'm just going to cut a line right here. If you are going to use this machine elsewhere, you just take this line off of the fuel pump. And I may do that. Well, you'll see when I take it apart. You'll also want to disconnect the wire harness, which is right here. It should just unplug. In fact, we can go ahead and do that. It does take a little bit of doing, and naturally I'm right-handed. I'm using my left hand, so it makes it a little bit harder for me. Okay, I'll have to use, it's coming out, but I'm going to have to use a pair of pliers to get the rest of the way out. Next, you'll want to disconnect the PTO, which is right here. That's just a weather pack connector. You can just disconnect. This other wire here is going to our kind of cobbled together start delay control, or can't even think of the name. Anyway, the control here, and so that is that. So now we have that off, and I don't know where all these other wires go. I'm gonna have to fish around in there a little bit to figure out how they have the starter wired up, because it's kind of interesting, but this should come off. Then there's this bottom bolt down there on the starter. That's got to come out, but you can get the engine up in the air before you take that out. So yeah, I think actually we might be able to, oh, I see why they did this. That way you can, this ties in there. Okay, that's what I thought. All right, and you'll have to take off the throttle and the choke cables, this is the choke cable, this is the throttle cable. You got to take those off, and I think once you've taken all that out, then you can take the bolts out of the oil pan. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to leave the drive shaft attached, and we're just going to pull the drive shaft out of the spline shaft going into the transaxle pump. At least that's the way I intend to do it. Now when you do that, you do risk bending these fins right here on the oil cooler. So that is something to pay close attention to. But before I do any of that, I'm going to go ahead and disconnect the battery, since these are new batteries. Actually got really lucky because I got 5 brand new batteries when I bought these machines, so they will serve me well. And they're Duracell brand, so pretty excited about that. I don't see a date on them though. But, oh, hey, 5 and 19, sweet. So I got 5 brand new batteries, because they put brand new batteries in all these machines. I don't have my cherry picker to where I can get to it, so I'm actually just going to lift this engine out. The engine should weigh about 110 pounds. If you struggle with that, get a friend to help you, or if you have an engine cherry picker, get a cherry picker. Did devise some way to get it out. I'm fortunate I can lift it out if I want to, and who knows, I may go get the 4066 and we'll pluck it out of there that way. But let me get to work on this, and we will go from there. Alright, so we got the battery out. I got this plug unplugged. Much like normal, these plugs get really packed with crap. You can look on both sides. This is pretty, you can just see how much came out just then. That's pretty normal. Next thing we're going to do is we're going to take off the choke cable and the throttle cable. Both of those you can just use, and remember on Onans, on 318s, the engine is SAE and the tractor itself is metric. So just something to be aware of. So everything on the engine is mostly you just need a 5/16, a 3/8, a 1/2 inch, and a 7/16 for the most part, except on the mounting bolts, in which case, gosh, I'm trying to remember what the mounting bolts are. I think one's a 16 millimeter, one's a 18 millimeter, something along those lines. This one right here you can also do with a screwdriver if you so choose. That's why I've got the screwdriver there, but you cannot, unless you have a really, really stubby screwdriver and it's really kind of loose, you cannot do the throttle cable. What I'm doing now is I'm just tightening this up. That way, one less thing I have to worry about falling off while I'm dealing with this. And I forgot to mention at the beginning part of this video, you have to disconnect the grounds, which are a 1/2 inch. Now this throttle system right here, we're gonna have to play with. When we put it in, we'll have to make sure the throttle system's set up correctly, and make sure we'll have to double check our PTO or our RPMs when we install this engine in the other 318. Should be pretty close, but you know, just as a good measure, we have to do that. So one of the things that's commonly lost is these little end caps that keep dust and debris out of the cables. They're pretty common to be gone. I'm actually kind of shocked that both of these are on here. So next what we're going to do is we're going to take off this ground right here, and after the ground, get a pair of pliers. We'll take this fuel line loose, and then we'll start working on we'll pull off the 4 bolts that mount the engine, and then we'll lift the engine up a little bit, and we will pull off the battery cable going to the starter. All right, well, there she is. She's out. Actually, no sign of oil leaks or anything, so that's really good. Here's that foot. Looks like it's been broken for quite a while. Not overly shocked about that. To get the engine out, basically, I told you I'd tell you the size. These right here are the back 2 bolts. They're only bolts. They're just self-tapping bolts with star washers. These are 14 millimeters. Then you have your front 2 bolts. This is the top right here on the oil pan foot, and these are underneath the machine. The bottom is 17 millimeters, and the top is 15 millimeters. So you need 3 different sockets to get 3 sockets and 2 ratchets to get this engine out. Like I said, it weighs 110 pounds, or approximately 110 pounds. Not exactly a light machine or light engine, but I mean, you can do it if you take your time. One of the things that always gives me fits is the starter. The starter cable, the starter nut, which is down here, but not right there, underneath there. That is 12 millimeters. So you have to undo that. So I think for right now, we're done with this frame. What I'm gonna do, probably there's gonna be a 322 video before this, in which I'm working on the 322 brakes. The brake system off this machine is gonna go on that 322. The rods and everything are gonna go on that 322. And what else do I need on the 322? Can't remember now. But what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to leave this complete setup whole right now, except for the gas tank. I'll go ahead and take the gas tank off. I don't need it. And then after I take the gas tank off, empty the gas out of it. If anybody needs a gas tank, let me know. That's a part that I don't need, and it'll be for sale eventually. And then I'll just leave this whole and I'll pressure wash it. That way I can get all the parts off and they're nice and clean. What we're going to do with this engine is I'm going to get it on this table right here. I'll clean off this table, put it on a metal pan. I got to drain the oil out of it, and then we'll take all the tin off of it, give the engine a good cleaning. We'll go ahead, pop the valve covers, inspect the valve lash, do all of that. Probably go ahead and we'll have to pull the PTO off to get the I want to check the bearing on the PTO, a couple other things. We'll go ahead and put a new oil filter on it, replace the fuel line from the crankcase to the fuel pump, and probably go ahead and clean the carb while we're at it. So I don't know if we'll give it a full clean, but we'll at least take the top off the carburetor, get it nice and clean. Probably what I will do is I did notice that the coil was loose here. I may actually replace that coil because I don't know if that bracket is broken or what. I'll have to see, but I may just replace it with a different coil that works. I mean, it'll be fine. Coils are one of those things that if you're buying one of these tractors and it doesn't have spark, don't go replace the coil first thing. Test the coil first. Probably one of the biggest things that I see guys do is replace the coil when it doesn't need to be replaced, or condenser for that matter. And everybody says, well, they're cheap enough. Well, yeah, they're cheap enough, but still you're going to spend 50, 60, 70 bucks replacing it when it doesn't need to be replaced. So a lot of times it's just a ground problem. Overall, this machine is pretty clean. Honestly, if it had a little bit less wear in the front axle, and it didn't have the leaking steering cylinder, I would probably use this frame over the 91 frame, because to be honest, this hydrostatic mechanism is a little bit tighter, but I would rather have, I don't want to take the hydraulic system apart. I'm just not a real big fan of that, so we're gonna use the 91 frame. So I think that's it for right now. Let me get this engine up on the table there, and I'll go ahead and take the drive shaft off. Oh, one thing. I see a question asked quite frequently. On some of these engines, they have a screen on the flywheel. Some do not. I do not. This is stock. I don't know when Deere quit ordering these engines without a flywheel screen, but there are some different specs for flywheel screen, no flywheel screen. So if your 318 doesn't have a flywheel screen, it doesn't mean that the engine's been taken out and it's been removed. So just something to note there. Not anything to worry about. Basically, the flywheel screen, just a little bit extra protection for large debris in the air filter. But if you have the belly screen on, not a big deal. So let me get the engine up on the table. Okay, so I got this engine up on the table here, and I got the oil draining down there. Not normal. Normally I use that table right there, but it's obviously full of just junk, and so I'm using this one. So I had to put what I normally do is not quite right, but we'll get there. So some of the things I've noticed since I pulled it out, I need to replace this baffle right here because it's cracked. If you can see that right there. I've got one of those, or I could borrow it off another engine. Not too big of a deal there. Drive shaft came off no problem. Drive shaft's actually in really, really good shape. I tested it out. I had my concerns at first because of how dirty it was, but actually there's no play in any of those U-joints or anything. So super happy about that. A good drive shaft helps me because I'll obviously be one P-series drive shaft ahead. So that's the part that I can get rid of. So what I'm going to do next is I'm actually going to go ahead and I'm probably going to... Actually, I think I'm just going to take the tin off and stop there for the moment. And by taking the tin off, then I can inspect the engine. Ultimately, I will probably I'll strip it down to a short block. That way when I flip it over, it's easy to deal with. And I can replace the oil pan relatively easy. Instead of using the parts that I have on hand, I'm going to go ahead and order some gaskets. That way they're here and don't have to worry about it, or at least that's my plan. What I do need to do is I need to get rid of this mess over here. This is not correct. I'm not really sure. I would seriously have to sit down and study this system right here. But I think what they did is it's a start assist relay. I think that's what they're aiming for here. But I don't understand how they did it. So I have another starter assist relay. In fact, let me go find it and I'll show it to you. All right, so here's a OEM starter assist relay. I'm guessing this does the same exact thing. Mounts very similar on the engine. You can actually build these. There's a guy on my tractor forum. His username's Brad. He actually sells these. I can't remember what he sells them for, but I know cheaper than what Deere makes them for. But yeah, so this is what a starter assist relay, or I can't remember the exact technical term. But because these Onans had so many ground problems, this really kind of helps with those ground problems. So I'll actually install this on this machine. Now, interestingly enough, my 318, even though it sits a lot, does not have a starter assist kit on it. It just doesn't need it. It's never needed it. When I first got it, it had a number of issues. This was way back before I even considered doing YouTube videos. I didn't know what I was doing. But we basically found out that it wouldn't, when I bought my 318, my first 318 back in 2012, something like that. Yeah, 2012. When I first bought it in 2012, actually this wire right here had come off the starter. That's why it wouldn't crank. But that's another story for another video. The only gasket I don't think I have is this gasket for the oil fill tube that goes into the oil pan. So that is something that I will have to find. So let me, I'll let the oil finish draining. Looking at the time now, probably should start wrapping up and getting done. And probably what I'll do is I'll go ahead and drag the 91 in here and take the hood off of it and everything, just set it off to the side. So that's where we're at on the 1993 18. If you need some, like I said, I'm going to use some of these parts for various projects. Somebody requested the hood and grill. The hood's no good. It's busted. It's in fact, it's out here. This hood right here is the one that came off the 1990. Kind of sad because it has a really, really good coat of paint on it. But unfortunately, if you look, you're missing two hood mounts. So, and they're busted off in the hood. So it would be pretty substantial to fix. But yeah, I mean, if not, I would say sure, have a hood. But anyway, I think that's it for now. Leave questions, comments below, and thanks for watching. I decided to work on this engine just a little bit more, at least get the covers off. I've gone ahead and got my replacement cover. I actually had one sitting in the scrap pile. And so this is the front cover, and then we've got, this is this side of the cover. Well, the reason I'm doing this video right here is not necessarily, all the covers are held on by 3/8 bolts. I covered that in my B43 rebuild series several years ago. I think that was back in 2015, 2016, something like that. But what I wanted to show you is when you don't have a belly screen on these machines, much like this tractor did not have a belly screen on, what will happen, and you couple that with the fact that there's a lack of a guard on the, or screen on the flywheel, grass is sucked up by the tractor and it's pushed out, or it should be pushed out in front of the engine. Unfortunately, in this particular case, and this is exactly how it looked when I pulled the side tin off of the engine, this is a grass mat, and if you look, there's no way to get around that. There's no way for air to get around that grass mat. So this particular side of the engine is not being cooled. Now, who knows how long this mat's been there, but it's there. And so this potentially, this side of the engine got hotter than the other side. The other side actually looks pretty good. The only thing I see right now is this voltage regulator has all kinds of mess hooked to it, but we'll figure that out later. Actually, this engine looks really, really good. It's nice and clean behind the grass, but this is why I'm taking the tins off. This grass mat over here is, I mean, finding this and getting this out of these fins is 100% why I'm doing it. I'll go ahead and clean up this oil up here. It's most likely coming out of our old points cover right here. This engine must be just old enough to still have a points cover, even though it's not a points engine. There's just a metal plate over the top of that, over the top of the points there. So I'm going to keep working on this. Here's that starter relay, assist relay, however we want to call it. Kind of interesting. I'll have to see if I can find any part numbers on it. But what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to go ahead and see if I can at least get the back cover off tonight, and then go ahead and take the oil pan off. That way it can drain, just kind of drip, and then I'll find an oil pan gasket and we'll get a new oil pan on there, and that should be pretty easy. I don't know if I'll get to that tonight, but I'm going to try. We might do the carburetor instead. So I'll keep working on this, and I'll come back when I make some more progress. The reason I'm not doing a full, kind of this video of all this is it takes me quite a bit of time. And what I figured what I'll do is when I take that engine apart in the 1991, I'll go ahead and take it apart, and I'll do that on video, because I probably won't take that engine apart for several months, and that'll give me a little bit more time to get some more space in the shop, and so I can lay out the components out, things like that. So off I go.